As I sat in the dim light of our living room, the weight of the world pressed down on my chest. I had always believed that love was enough to weather any storm. My wife, Sarah, and I had built a life together filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the mundane routines that came with marriage. We were not the couple that went out every night, but we found solace in each other's company. We had our inside jokes, the late-night talks, and the comfort of knowing we were each other's safe haven. Or so I thought. There had been whispers of discontent, but I brushed them aside. Sarah had seemed distant lately, lost in her thoughts, often scrolling through her phone with a frown etched on her face. I chalked it up to work stress. She was a graphic designer, and deadlines had been tight. I thought if I could just give her space and support, she would come out of this funk. I wanted to be the understanding husband, the one who didn't pressure her for conversation when she needed silence. But now I can't help but wonder if I had misread the signs. It was a Thursday evening when the first crack appeared. I was at the bar with a few friends, and among the laughter, one of them casually mentioned a bachelor party. "Did you hear about Sarah?" he said, his tone light and carefree. "She crashed it like she owned the place." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the room spin for a moment, my mind racing as I tried to process what he had just said. Sarah, at a bachelor party. It didn't make sense. She hadn't mentioned anything about it, nor had I heard of any friend getting married. As I drove home that night, my heart pounded in my chest. I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind, each iteration more agonizing than the last. How could she? Why would she? The questions clawed at me, and I felt a pit of dread settle in my stomach. I knew I had to confront her, but a part of me clung to the hope that there had been some kind of misunderstanding. Perhaps she had just stopped by for a moment, maybe to drop something off or say hello. When I walked through the door, the house felt eerily quiet. I found her sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to the TV, but she wasn't really watching. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing as I considered how to approach this. Should I be calm and collected, or should I demand answers? "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk." Her head snapped up, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of panic in her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone too casual, as if she could brush off the weight of my words. "I heard something today," I started, my throat dry. "About you crashing a bachelor party, is it true?" The color drained from her face, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. I was just what?" I interrupted, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Just having fun, just being careless." "You weren't even invited, Sarah." Her eyes darted away, avoiding mine. I could see the guilt etched on her face, and in that moment I felt a rush of emotions, betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. "It was just a mistake," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen." But those words felt hollow. The laughter and joy of that night echoed in my mind, a stark contrast to the silence that now filled our home. I wanted to scream, to shake her, and demand to know how she could do this to us. Instead, I felt the walls closing in, the reality of our marriage crumbling around me. I had trusted her, loved her deeply, and now that trust felt like shattered glass beneath my feet. "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" I don't know," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I was just trying to escape for a little while." Escape. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. As I stood there, I realized that the life we had built together was teetering on the edge, and I didn't know how to bring it back from the brink. Would I ever be able to look at her the same way again? The confrontation left me reeling, like I had been hit by a freight train. I stood there, my heart racing, as I processed the reality of what had just unfolded. Sarah's tears fell silently, and I felt a strange mix of anger and pity for her. How had we arrived at this moment? The life we built together felt like a facade, and I was left questioning everything I thought I knew about her, about us. In the days that followed the confrontation, the silence in our home was deafening. We moved around each other like ghosts, avoiding eye contact and conversation. I found it hard to look at her without feeling a wave of resentment wash over me. The weight of her betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating any remnants of love I thought we still shared. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere, racing with thoughts of what had happened and what it meant for our future. I remember the first time I saw her after the confrontation. We were both in the kitchen, preparing dinner, and the tension was palpable. I could hear the clatter of pots and pans as we worked side by side, yet it felt as though we were miles apart. I stole glances at her, searching for any sign that she felt the gravity of what she had done. But her eyes were downcast, and she focused intently on chopping vegetables. I couldn't bring myself to ask her how she was feeling. I was too afraid of her answer. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the kitchen window, I finally broke the silence. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. She paused, the knife hovering above the cutting board. I know I messed up, but it was just a stupid mistake and I'm sorry." Her voice cracked and I could see the desperation in her eyes. "Just a stupid mistake," I echoed, incredulous. "You crashed a bachelor party, Sarah. You didn't just make a small error, you violated the trust we built over years. You put everything we have at risk for what? A night of fun." The anger bubbled up again and I could feel my heart racing as I spoke. "I didn't think it would lead to anything serious," she pleaded, her voice rising. "It was just a few drinks with some guys I didn't even know. I thought it would be harmless." Harmless. The word felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that she thought crashing a party meant nothing. I pictured her with those men, laughing, drinking, and losing herself in a moment that should have never happened. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice trembling. "You betrayed me, you betrayed us." The emotional fallout from that confrontation was overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal and confusion. I couldn't escape the images that flooded my mind. Her smiling, her laughter, the way she looked at me with love, all of it now tainted by the knowledge of her infidelity. I found myself oscillating between anger and sadness, and it left me feeling hollow. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the chaos at home. I became a shell of the person I once was, going through the motions while feeling like I was living someone else's life. My friends noticed the change in me. They asked if I was okay, but I brushed off their concerns with vague answers. I didn't want to burden them with the details of my crumbling marriage. I felt ashamed and embarrassed, as if I had failed in some way. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments of our relationship in my mind. I thought about our wedding day, the vows we exchanged, and the dreams we had for our future. I thought about the times we laughed together, the vacations we took, and the plans we made. All of it now felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of what I had lost. And then there were the questions. Did I miss the signs? Had I been so wrapped up in my own world that I failed to see her unhappiness? Was there something I could have done differently to prevent this? The weight of those questions pressed down on me like a heavy blanket, suffocating any hope I had of moving forward. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I returned home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I could see the bags under her eyes, the way she had lost weight. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, my heart racing. I didn't want to hear more excuses, more apologies that felt empty. But part of me wanted to know if she was truly remorseful, if she understood the gravity of her actions. "Fine," I replied, bracing myself for whatever was to come. "I know I messed up," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking a lot about everything and I realize how much I've hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you and I'll do anything to fix this." "Anything?" I asked, skepticism lacing my tone. "What does that even mean, Sarah? You can't just take back what you've done. You shattered my trust." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks, "but I want to try. I want to go to counseling, to work on our marriage. I love you and I don't want to lose you." Her words hung in the air and I felt a flicker of hope. But could I really trust her again? Could we rebuild what had been broken? As I lay in bed that night, I realized that the path ahead would not be easy. The road to healing would be long and fraught with challenges. But for the first time since the confrontation, I felt a small spark of determination. I wanted to know if we could make it through this, but the answer seemed elusive. The days turned into weeks, and the silence that had once engulfed our home began to shift, albeit slowly. Sarah and I found ourselves in a strange limbo, a space where we were both present yet emotionally distant. I could see the effort she was making, her attempts to engage in conversation, her willingness to listen to my feelings. But every time she reached out, I felt the familiar sting of betrayal wash over me, a reminder that our foundation had been shattered. We agreed to go to couples counseling, a decision that felt both necessary and daunting. I remember sitting in the waiting room of the therapist's office, my heart pounding in my chest. Around me, other couples waited, some holding hands, others sitting in tense silence. I felt like an intruder in a world that no longer belonged to me. I glanced at Sarah, who sat beside me, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of hair. She looked vulnerable, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then the memory of her betrayal flooded back, and the sympathy turned to resentment. The sessions began with the therapist guiding us through the basics of communication. Each time we met, I would listen to Sarah's explanations of her actions, her justifications, and her regrets. She spoke of feeling lost, of wanting to escape the pressures of life, and of making a reckless decision that spiraled out of control. I tried to understand her perspective, but the pain of her infidelity was still fresh, and the anger simmered just below the surface. In one session, after she had shared her feelings, the therapist turned to me. "How do you feel about what Sarah has said?" she asked. Her voice calm and steady. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I feel betrayed," I finally managed. "I feel like the person I loved and trusted is gone. It's hard to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one who made that choice." The therapist nodded, encouraging me to continue. "It's important to express those feelings, to allow yourself to grieve the loss of the relationship you once had," she said. Grieve. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I realized that I was not just grieving the betrayal. I was grieving the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared. I thought about the vacations we had planned, the house we wanted to buy, and the family we had hoped to start. All of it now felt like a distant memory, tainted by her choices. As the weeks went by, the sessions became a mix of progress and setbacks. There were moments when I felt a glimmer of hope, when we would laugh together or share a vulnerable moment. But then, just as quickly, the weight of her betrayal would crash down on me again, leaving me feeling lost and alone. One night after a particularly emotional session, I returned home feeling drained. I found Sarah sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. "I just want to make this right," she said, her voice shaky. "I love you and I hate what I've done." I looked at her, searching for sincerity in her eyes. "Do you really understand what making it right means?" I asked, my voice low. "It's not just about saying you're sorry, Sarah. It's about rebuilding trust, and that takes time." "I know," she replied, her voice breaking. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll be patient. I'll answer any questions you have, no matter how painful. I want to show you that I can be the wife you deserve." Her words struck a chord deep within me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to accept her promises and work toward healing. But another part of me screamed that I was setting myself up for more pain. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing, and I was terrified of allowing myself to be vulnerable again. The next day, I found myself at a coffee shop, sitting alone with my thoughts. I stared out the window, watching people pass by, couples laughing, friends chatting, and families enjoying their time together. I felt like an outsider, someone who had been cast adrift in a sea of happiness while I was stuck in my own turmoil. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help but reflect on our relationship. I thought about the moments that had brought us together, the late-night talks, the adventures, the quiet evenings spent in each other's arms. I remembered how much I loved her, how deeply I had trusted her, but now that love felt tainted. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our old photos. Memories that once brought me joy now felt like daggers in my heart. I came across a picture from our wedding day, her radiant smile lighting up the frame. I remembered the vows we had exchanged, the promises we made to each other. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. How could she have thrown it all away? That evening I returned home, and as I walked through the door, I found Sarah waiting for me with dinner prepared. The table was set with care, candles flickering softly in the dim light. She looked at me with hopeful eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of warmth. But then the reality of our situation crashed down on me again, and the warmth faded. "Dinner looks nice," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. "I wanted to do something special for us, to show you that I'm committed to making this work." As we sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily at first. We talked about mundane things, work, our favorite shows, and what we wanted to do on the weekend. But the underlying tension was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Midway through dinner, Sarah reached across the table, her hand brushing against mine. "I've been thinking," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Maybe we could take a weekend trip together, just the two of us, to reconnect." The idea intrigued me, but the thought of spending time together in such an intimate setting filled me with apprehension. "I don't know, Sarah," I replied cautiously. "I think we need to take things slower." "I understand," she said quickly, her face falling slightly. "I just want to show you that I'm serious about us. I want to make amends." As I looked at her, I realized that I wanted to believe her, to grasp onto the hope that we could find our way back to each other. But the fear of being hurt again loomed large in my mind, casting a shadow over any flicker of hope. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but wonder if we could truly heal from this. Could we rebuild our marriage, or was this just a temporary pause before the inevitable end? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I drifted off to sleep with a heavy heart, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The weeks continued to unfold like a slow-motion train wreck. Each day was a mix of mundane routines and the heavy undercurrent of unresolved tension between Sarah and me. We went to couples counseling weekly, but the sessions felt like an emotional roller coaster. Some days I would leave with a glimmer of hope, and other days I would walk out feeling more lost than ever. One afternoon, as I was driving home from work, I found myself in a daze, replaying the events of the past few weeks in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was trying hard to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was struggling with her own guilt and shame, and I knew that my anger and hurt were tearing her apart. But how could I help her when I was still grappling with my own pain? That evening, we had another counseling session scheduled. As we sat in the therapist's office, I could feel the tension building in my chest. The therapist encouraged us to express our feelings openly, and I felt the familiar rush of emotions bubbling up inside me. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady but tinged with frustration, "I keep hearing you talk about how sorry you are, but I need to understand why you did it in the first place. What made you think it was okay to crash that party and betray my trust?" She looked down, her fingers interlaced in her lap. "I was feeling overwhelmed," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could just have a little fun, that it wouldn't mean anything, but I was wrong. I didn't think about how it would hurt you." "Not thinking about how it would hurt me is the problem, Sarah," I shot back, my voice rising. "You put your desires above our marriage, and that's what I can't wrap my head around." The therapist interjected gently, reminding us to focus on the feelings behind our words rather than the accusations. I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my anger. I wanted to heal, but the pain was still too raw. As the session continued, we began to explore the underlying issues in our relationship, our communication styles, our expectations, and the ways we had both contributed to the distance that had grown between us. I realized that while Sarah's infidelity was a breach of trust, there were deeper issues at play that needed to be addressed. After the session, I felt exhausted but somewhat hopeful. We had laid bare our vulnerabilities, and for the first time in a while I felt like we were making progress. But as we drove home, the weight of uncertainty returned. I wondered if we could truly heal and if I could ever fully forgive her. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about our plans for the future, the dreams we had shared, and the love we had cultivated over the years. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild, but the fear of being hurt again loomed large in my mind. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to a close friend, Mark, someone I trusted implicitly. I needed to talk to someone who could listen without judgment and offer a fresh perspective. We met at a local bar, and as we settled into a booth, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "Dude, you look like you've been through the ringer," Mark said, his brow furrowing with concern. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "It's Sarah. She cheated on me with a guy from a bachelor party she crashed." Mark's eyes widened and he leaned back in his seat. "Wow, that's rough, man. How are you holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "Some days I feel like I want to fight for our marriage, and other days I just want to walk away. I'm so angry and hurt, but I still love her." "Have you talked to her about how you're feeling?" he asked. "Yeah, we've been going to counseling, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. I need to know if I can trust her again, and I don't know how to get there." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "Trust is a big deal. It takes time to rebuild, and it's not going to be easy. But if you both want it, you need to communicate openly about your feelings. You have to be honest with each other, even when it's uncomfortable." His words resonated with me. I realized that while I had been vocal about my hurt, I had also been holding back my fears about the future. I needed to express my doubts, my insecurities, and my longing for the relationship we once had. After our conversation, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I returned home with a determination to confront not just Sarah's actions, but also my own feelings. That evening, as we sat on the couch together, I decided it was time to lay it all out on the table. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady but vulnerable, "I need to talk to you about everything I've been feeling. I want to be honest with you." She looked at me, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Okay," she said softly. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I'm scared that we won't be able to rebuild what we had. I'm scared of investing my heart again, only to have it broken. I want to fight for us, but I need to know if you're truly committed to making this work." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "I am committed. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make it right." Her sincerity struck a chord deep within me. I realized that while the path ahead would be challenging, we were both willing to put in the effort. It was a small flicker of hope, but it was enough to reignite the possibility of healing. As we talked late into the night, I felt a sense of relief. I was finally allowing myself to be vulnerable, to express my fears and doubts. It was a step forward, and while I knew we had a long way to go, I felt a renewed sense of determination. In that moment, I understood that healing wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, patience, and an unwavering commitment from both of us. But for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could find our way back to each other. The weeks following our heart-to-heart conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Sarah and I made a conscious effort to communicate more openly, to share our feelings and fears without holding back. It was a delicate dance, and while the wounds of betrayal were still fresh, I found comfort in the small steps we were taking together. We continued attending counseling sessions, and with each visit, I felt a little lighter. The therapist guided us through exercises designed to foster trust and understanding. We learned to express our needs and desires, to listen to one another without judgment. I found myself opening up about my fears, my anxiety about the future, my deep-seated worries about whether I could truly forgive her. Sarah, in turn, shared her feelings of guilt and shame, her longing to be the partner I deserved. One evening, after a particularly productive session, we returned home feeling hopeful. The atmosphere in the house had shifted. It felt less like a battleground and more like a sanctuary. We decided to cook dinner together, a simple act that felt significant in its normalcy. As we chopped vegetables and stirred pots, we laughed and joked, the tension of the past beginning to dissolve. "Do you remember our first date?" Sarah asked, a nostalgic smile spreading across her face. I chuckled, recalling the awkwardness of that night. "Yeah, you spilled your drink all over yourself. I thought I'd blown it right then and there." She laughed, and for a moment it felt like we were back in time, before the betrayal, before the hurt. "I was so embarrassed, but you made me feel at ease. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be with you." As we reminisced about those early days, I felt a flicker of warmth in my heart. It was a reminder of the love that had brought us together in the first place. A love that, despite the pain, still had the potential to heal. That weekend, we decided to take a short trip to a nearby cabin in the woods. It was a chance to escape our daily routine and reconnect in a more peaceful setting. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as we packed our bags. Would this trip bring us closer, or would it serve as a painful reminder of the fracture in our relationship? The drive was filled with light conversation and laughter. I could sense the tension easing as we ventured further into nature. The cabin was cozy, surrounded by tall trees and the sounds of chirping birds. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to breathe and simply be together. As we settled in, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We spent the evening cooking together, sharing stories and enjoying the quiet. After dinner, we sat outside on the porch, wrapped in blankets, gazing at the stars. It was a moment of intimacy that I had missed dearly, and I found myself leaning closer to her, feeling the warmth of her presence. "Thank you for doing this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's been hard, but I'm grateful that we're trying." "I am too," I replied, my heart swelling with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I want to make this work, Sarah, I really do." In that moment, I realized that while the road ahead was still fraught with challenges, we were both committed to healing. But the thought of her betrayal still loomed in the background, a ghost that would not easily be exorcised. The next day, we decided to go for a hike. As we walked through the woods, the beauty of nature surrounded us, and for a while I felt like we were escaping the weight of our reality. We talked about our hopes for the future, the things we wanted to achieve together, and the lessons we had learned from this experience. "Do you think we can really come back from this?" I asked, my voice tinged with vulnerability. "I believe we can," she replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "It's going to take time, but I'm committed to doing the work. I don't want to lose you." Her words resonated deeply within me, and I found myself wanting to believe her. But the fear of being hurt again lingered in the back of my mind. I knew that trust was not something that could be rebuilt overnight. It would take patience, effort, and a willingness to confront the pain together. As we continued our hike, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were slowly starting to find our way back to each other. The laughter and joy we once shared were beginning to resurface, even if only in fleeting moments. We were learning to navigate the complexities of our relationship, and with each passing day, I felt a little more hopeful. That evening, as we sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was a reminder that while the journey ahead would be challenging, we were taking it together. I was beginning to see glimpses of the love we had built, the connection that had drawn us to each other in the first place. But just as hope began to bloom, a nagging thought crept into my mind. What if this was all temporary? What if, despite our best efforts, we couldn't fully recover? The fear of losing her again was a shadow that refused to fade. The next day, as we packed up to head home, I felt a mix of emotions. I was grateful for the time we had spent together, but I was also acutely aware that the real work lay ahead. We would have to face the reality of our relationship, the challenges that still loomed large, and the trust that needed to be rebuilt. As we drove home, I glanced at Sarah, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. I reached over and took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant, a reminder that despite everything, we were still in this together. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm willing to fight for us," I said, my voice steady. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with emotion. "Me too. I don't want to lose you. I'll do whatever it takes." As we drove into the sunset, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could find our way back to each other. Returning home from our trip felt different. The cabin in the woods had given us a brief respite from the chaos of our lives, but the reality of our situation was waiting for us as we stepped through the front door. The shadows of our past lingered, reminding me that while we had made progress, our journey was far from over. In the days that followed, Sarah and I continued to attend counseling and work diligently on our communication. We established new routines, including weekly check-ins where we could openly discuss our feelings without fear of judgment. I found that expressing my emotions, while still challenging, became a vital part of our healing process. It was a way to clear the air and ensure that we were both on the same page. But there were still moments when the weight of betrayal would crash down on me unexpectedly. I remember one evening, sitting on the couch as Sarah flipped through channels. A romantic movie came on, and I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could she enjoy a love story when our own felt so fractured? I snapped, my voice sharp. How can you watch this? It's a reminder of everything we've lost. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise. I didn't mean to upset you. I thought it was just a movie. It's not just a movie, I shouted, feeling the frustration boil over. It's a reminder that we're not where we should be. We should be happy together, not grappling with this mess. Her expression softened, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make things better, but I can't change the past. I just want us to move forward. In that moment, I realized that while my anger was justified, I needed to channel it into something constructive rather than destructive. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my body begin to ease. I'm sorry for snapping at you, I said, my voice calmer. This is hard for both of us, and I need to remember that. We sat together in silence for a moment, the weight of our emotions hanging in the air. It was a reminder that healing was not a linear process. It was filled with ups and downs. But as we navigated those moments together, I felt a growing sense of understanding and empathy for each other. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed changes in our relationship. There were still challenges, but we were learning to face them together. We began to create new memories, ones that weren't tainted by betrayal. We went on spontaneous outings, explored new hobbies, and even started planning small trips together. The laughter that had been absent for so long began to return, slowly but surely. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah, feeling a warmth in my heart. I know it's been a tough journey, but I'm proud of how far we've come, I said, my voice filled with sincerity. She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I am too. I never want to go back to where we were. I'm committed to us, no matter how long it takes. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always be a part of our story, they didn't have to define our future. We were learning to rebuild, to trust again, and to love each other in a way that acknowledged our past while looking toward a brighter tomorrow. As we embraced, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but I was ready to face them with Sarah. We were both committed to the work it would take to heal our relationship, and for the first time in a long while, I felt optimistic about our future. In the months that followed, we continued to grow, both as individuals and as a couple. We learned to appreciate the small moments, the laughter shared over breakfast, the quiet evenings spent together, the adventures that awaited us. We were learning to love each other in a new way, one that was stronger and more resilient than before. I still had my moments of doubt, but I was learning to confront those fears rather than let them consume me. I was learning to trust again, not just in Sarah, but in myself and in the love we shared. It was a journey, and while it would take time, I was willing to put in the effort. As I lay in bed one night, I reflected on how far we had come. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer the defining aspect of our relationship. Instead, we were building something new, something rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and a deeper understanding of each other. Looking ahead, I realized that life would always present challenges, but I felt ready to face them. With Sarah by my side, I believed that we could weather any storm. We were two imperfect people, learning to navigate the complexities of love and trust, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about our future. As I drifted off to sleep, I held on to that hope, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, we were in this together. We were learning to love each other again, and that was a beautiful beginning.